I'm going to share with you a story of two people, two captains of vessels that both dealt with the exact same crisis, a hole in those vessels. And what I'm going to use to illustrate how these two different captains responded to this unbelievable crisis that they experienced suddenly tells us a lot about leadership and a lot about inspiration. So let me start off with the first of these leaders, a woman named Tammy Jo Schultz. She was flying Southwest Airlines 1380 from LaGuardia, New York to Dallas, Texas, when the left engine exploded and tore a hole in the side of her plane. Now, in that moment, a lot of things happened. One thing that happened is a passenger, unfortunately, was sucked fatally into that hole. Obviously, cabin pressure fell. But hydraulic lines were also cut. Fuel lines were cut. She was dealing with an incredible, unscripted level of crises simultaneously. And she discovered pretty quickly that the plane wanted to descend, and so she let it descend. And her co-captain suggested going to Philadelphia, and they ended up landing in Philadelphia. And what I'm going to show you right now is a very, very, very short clip of her communication with air traffic controllers.
Southwest 1380. I understand your emergency. Let me know when you want to go in.
Yeah, we have a part of the aircraft missing, so we're going to need to slow down a bit.
Southwest 1380. Speed is your discretion. Maintain at any altitude above 3,000 feet, and you let me know when you want to turn base.
All right. Down to 3,000. Okay, could you have the medical meet us there on the runway as well? We've got injured passengers.
Injured passengers, okay. And is your airplane physically on fire?
No, it's not on fire, but part of it's missing. They said there was a hole and someone went out.
I'm sorry, you said there was a hole and somebody went out? Southwest 1380, it doesn't matter. We'll work it out there. So the airport's just off to your right. Reported in sight, please.
Southwest 1380, airport's in sight.
Southwest 1380, runway 27 left, clear to land. Southwest 1380, right turn when you're able. If you want to stop wherever you need to is fine.
Thank you. We're going to stop right here by the fire truck. Thanks, guys, for the help.
So if you were to use one word to describe her voice, I think we would all agree that the word would be calm. She is incredibly calm. And her calm voice mattered not just in communicating with the air traffic controllers, but I mentioned before that she realized pretty quickly that the plane wanted to descend, and she let it descend. Now that plane dropped 20,000 feet in less than 5 minutes. But she did something really, really remarkable during that descent, is she recognized the experience of her passengers. If you are a passenger back there and you have a hole in your plane and you're going down 20,000 feet pretty quickly, what do you think you're going to do? You're going to crash. So she got on the plane, on the intercom, and she said 10 words that everyone said was utterly transformative, taking from like heart attack level panic to hope and possibility. And those 10 words were, "We're not going down, we're going to Philly." And what she did in that moment is she helped people make sense of their experience. She gave them a sense of understanding that this descent had a purpose rather than a free fall. Now, the other thing that Tammy Jo Schultz did when they landed, which is also pretty remarkable, is she went row by row and just checked in on every passenger. And she said later on, she said, "I'm a little shocked that my stroll down the aisle got more national attention than the incredible skill it took to land this crippled plane." Tells us something really important. Now, I'm going to tell you about another captain named Francesco Cicatino, and some of you may have heard of him. And he got too close to shore one day on a Mediterranean cruise and tore a 150-foot hole in his particular vessel. Now, what's also remarkable about this is he claims he got so close to shore to salute some mariners. Prosecutors claim it was to impress his mistress, a Moldovan dancer. But what isn't controversial is what happened next, which is nothing. He didn't do anything for an hour. He spent the next hour trying to figure out what story he was going to tell. In the end, 32 people perished because of his delay. Now, I'm going to show you a little clip of him talking to the Coast Guard. Now, what's particularly interesting about him talking to the Coast Guard is he's in a lifeboat at the time he's talking. He's not on his ship anymore. Now, he claims he tripped and fell into the lifeboat, remarkably. He also did one of these other amazing things where he tripped and fell out of his uniform into civilian clothing. And so you can hear them talking now to him.
Lei sale su quella biscaggina e va a bordo della nave. Va a bordo della nave e mi viene a dire, mi riporta quante persone ci sono. Le è chiaro? Io sto registrando questa comunicazione, comandante Schettino. In questo momento la nave è inclinata. Ho capito. C'è gente, ascolti, c'è gente che sta scendendo dalla biscaggina di prua. Lei quella biscaggina la percorre in senso inverso, sale sulla nave e mi dice quante persone e che cosa hanno a bordo, chiaro? Mi dice se ci sono bambini, donne o persone bisognose di assistenza e me ne dice il numero di ciascuna di queste categorie. È chiaro? Guardi Schettino che lei si è salvato forse dal mare, ma io la porto veramente molto male, faccio passare l'anima dei guai. Vado a bordo.
So you can hear real infuriation in the Coast Guard DeFalco's voice, right? I'm going to make you pay. And Schettino did pay. He spent many years in prison for dereliction of duty, manslaughter, et cetera. And I want you now to think about a Schultz in your life and a Schettino in your life. So someone who inspired you, changed you inside, created this wellspring of hope and possibility, and someone who infuriated you, creating a seething cauldron of rage and resentment. And I've asked tens of thousands of people this question across the world. And I'm going to give you 5 big insights or 5 big ideas from my research in the next 5 minutes. So here's the first one. Inspiring and infuriating leaders exist on an enduring continuum that is made up of 3 universal factors. I'm going to break that down to it. First is this idea that there is this continuum, right? So we have a Schultz who's courageous versus cowardly, right? Selfless versus selfish, right? Sees the big picture, lost in the weeds. So we can start to see that what I discovered in asking tens of thousands of people is that the inspiring leader and the infuriating leader are mirror images of each other. Now, the second part of what I just told you is I said that they are universal. That is, there is not a single characteristic that inspires or infuriates that's not mentioned in every single country in the world. And the third thing is that there's 3 universal factors. And these are being visionary, how we see the world, being exemplar, how we are in the world, our presence, and then being a mentor, how we interact in the world. And I'm going to give you a little mnemonic device so you can remember this, called the Venn diagram of inspiring leadership. Now, here's the second big idea. Why are there 3 universal factors? It's because each one of them satisfy a fundamental human need. Being visionary satisfies the need for meaning and understanding. That's what Tammy Jo Schultz gave her passengers, a sense of understanding, right? Being exemplar satisfies the need for protection and passion, that sense that people are safe. And being a mentor means satisfying that need for, I belong, I'm included, but I'm also valued and I'm respected. So I'm going to just tell you very briefly about each one of these dimensions. I'm just going to give you kind of a quote. Here's a quote that really captures what it means to be visionary, right? People who have a why to live can bear almost any how. You can suffer the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune if you know why you're doing something. So inspiring leaders give us an optimistic why. They help people make sense of their experience and provide meaning for their experience. We're not going down, we're going to Philly. Now, exemplars, how we are in the world, do a couple different things, but one of them is they embody their vision. They're not hypocrites. Hypocrites are the most infuriating leaders of them all. They activate the rage centers of the brain. But as we saw with Tammy Jo Schultz, they're also calm and courageous protectors. So here are 2 very similar people. Bubalina from Greece, she led the independence of Greece. George Washington led the independence of America. And look how similar these paintings are. Where's their boat? It's the lead boat. What are they doing in the boat? They're standing up in the boat. they're taking on the most risk. And third is mentor. And I love this quote from Confucius that really captures this idea. Tell me, and I will forget. Show me, and I may remember. But it's only when you involve me that I truly understand. And so inspiring mentors empower and elevate others. And if we really think of this continuum again, right, we have involving others versus micromanagers. They're so infuriating. Or people that share credit, elevate others, versus steal credit and claim it. One of the most infuriating things that happens if you do employee surveys is people stealing their ideas. So we have the Venn diagram of inspiring leadership. Now, the third big idea, and this gets back to something that Michael talked about in nature versus nurture, is that inspiring leaders aren't just born, they can be made. What I've established in my research is that there is a universal set of attributes, characteristics, and behaviors, and because of that, they can be identified, they can be practiced, and they can be developed. And I don't have time to go through all of these right now, but these are sort of the different ones. The fourth big idea is that as a leader, the Venn diagram really matters because you really matter. Neutrality is not an option. You don't have a choice of whether you impact people when you're a leader. You will inspire or you will infuriate. And to highlight this, I'm going to tell you a story about my first day in graduate school in 1993 with Danny Kahneman, who is the only psychologist who won the Nobel Prize in Economics. It's my first day, 11 graduate students. I'm intimidated by their brain power. Finally get a chance. I think I'm going to say something insightful. I raise my hand, and I still remember the 4 things Danny did that day. Crossed his arms, shook his head, scrunched up his face. He said, "That's not right at all." Now, Danny moved on, and the rest of the class did, but I was frozen in place. It took me weeks. Those words reverberated inside of me to speak up. But about 6 weeks later, I saw Danny in the hallway. And Danny, without stopping his stroll down the hallway, just turned over his shoulder and said, "Hey, Adam, I love reading your reflection papers. You're a great writer." And I was so filled with so much joy and energy, I literally just started skipping down the hallway. And I coined a phrase that captured these 2 very different Danny Kahneman experiences that represent the exact same concept, the leader amplification effect. When we are in a position of leadership, we have a bigger, our signals get amplified, our impact gets greater, and the reactions get intensified. They grow essentially in style. And to give you just one example of this other example of leader amplification, someone told me a story recently where they said, their boss said to them, "Come by my office Tuesday at 3 p.m. I need to talk to you." Now, this was Thursday. They said on Thursday, "Come by my office at 3 p.m. I need to talk to you." She did not sleep for 5 days. It's like, oh my God, am I losing people? Am I losing my job? Did I do something wrong? And then she met him at 3 p.m. on Tuesday, and he said, "Oh, yes, I just want to go over the agenda for Friday's meeting." And think about that. If he had said, "Come by my office Tuesday at 3 p.m., we can go over Friday's agenda," they're both 13 words. It would have cost him nothing. So one of the things that we need to do as leaders is to recognize that we are leaders, that we have power, that our signals are amplified, that we're going to have this impact. And once we become aware of that, we can start to recognize little things like telling the person why we want to meet with them can be somehow transformative for them. So this is the Venn diagram of inspiring leadership that I presented. And I'm going to end with the 5th big idea. And this is, how do we take this and make this an everyday part of our experience to be more inspiring? And I'm going to use a phrase called reap what you sow. Now, this comes from the Bible, right? Reap what you sow is the idea that the energy we put out in the world is the energy we get back. If we put out inspiring energy into the world, we're going to receive inspiring energy back. But if we put infuriating energy, we're going to get infuriating energy back. So what is reap what you sow? Notice that mine is spelled differently because it's an acronym. And it's going to begin with reflection. We should reflect on our experiences of when we've been inspiring and when maybe we've been infuriating, and how we might move ourselves from the continuum of infuriation to the other side of inspiration. The second thing is periodically do what I asked you to do earlier. Think of a Schultz in your life, person that inspires you. What could you do to embody or emulate those behaviors? And then you can take those reflections and those emulations and you can turn them into intentions. And then you can turn those intentions into practice. And so here's my final slide and my final thought for you is you can inspire others. Now you may wonder, why do I have a coffee cup up there? Because I'm going to tell you a little story about a CEO told me recently after learning about my ideas. He said, I actually made what I call my coffee commitment or my coffee compliment. Every morning now, over my cup of coffee, I'll send out a text or an email to someone in my orbit and either praise them for a job well done or express gratitude or thanks for something they did to help me. It might be something like simple, hey, I was thinking about that presentation you gave last week and just how you really hit it out of the park, or that report that we finished, I couldn't have done it without your help. And he told me 3 really interesting things about it. The first thing he said is he quickly discovered that sending a compliment over text is better than sending a compliment in person. Now that seems surprising, right? We're always told to do things in person. He said, when I compliment people in person, they get embarrassed. They're like, oh, okay, yeah, you know? But he said, when I compliment them over text, I discovered that they savor it. One person said, I read your text 5 times over the weekend. They get to share it. Someone else said, I shared it with my mom who was in the hospital and she was so thrilled, right? And the third thing he gets is rather than embarrassed reactions, he gets these glowing, effusive responses back. And he said, here's the shocking thing for me. I started doing my coffee compliments to put a skip in their step. But in the end, it put a skip in my step. So I call on all of you to think of one thing that you can do each day to be a little bit more inspiring so that you can put a skip in other people's steps. And if you do, you're going to spread the seeds of inspiration and you're going to put a skip in your own step. Thank you so much.